This slideshow is an overview of the progress and status of the redesign concepts being developed for Treasure. What we're looking at here is an aerial view of the model of the proposed structure to date with about 50% of the density removed. And you'll notice that there's a large portion of the development is centered around the area abutting the connection between Lowell and Empire. And that's primarily due to the way the MPD agreement was structured and the volumes within which they were to work were designed. This gives you an idea of what that view looking up Lowell would be. Looking straight up Lowell, and at the end of Lowell, the building as proposed for the Treasure project. And that is one of the things that's been probably the most critical in the review of how it relates to Old Town as the building's located at that location. And then a view back over Lower Main Street. You can see we're actually looking over at Marriott. And a view back at the project as perceived from Main and Heber. But what we've done is we've looked at three different concepts. The first concept really tried hard to follow the existing MPD guidelines and language. Looking at the building boundary, you can see that diagram. The line with the two dots that's dashed around the property is the boundary defined by the MPD, and then there's a volume that's described in the MPD that caps off at a certain elevation and then moves forward. What we tried to do in all of these concepts was to create a new entrance so that we could keep the scale lower at the corner of Lowell and Empire, and create an outdoor entry versus just driving right into either a retaining wall or into a building structure, and try and create something unique in this location which would add value both to the Old Town, the residents, and to the resort project itself. The smaller buildings that are kind of fractured looking in the center are only a few stories tall, and the majority of the residential and the hotel was located in the two towers with quite a bit of height. Although we're following the terrain and trying to work with the guidelines, what we found very quickly, this wasn't solving the problems that we were looking to solve. So we moved on to the next step. Next step for us was conceptually look at this as if it was part of the land management code and just say we would like to keep the buildings at the perimeters to follow the existing terrain. Create variation in scale, hug the mountainside, step up, maybe take on a little bit of more of a mining aesthetic. Concept number two, which we'll look at shortly, this is an elevation of that, and also very similar to the elevation you would see for concept three, but the concept two follows the existing boundaries, but not quite so much the height. I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute, but basically the land management code defines height based on existing grade, and we tried to follow that in concept two. We also looked at ways to move people across the ski run. You notice in the middle of that scribbles that I've written is ski run, and above is a pedestrian bridge. The pedestrian bridge is designed to move people across the ski run areas and really kind of mimic some of the mining aesthetics of ore moving bridges and things that we saw, conveyors. Maybe even these bridges have moving walkways and we're moving people instead of ore. Concept two, and this is site plan looking above, you can notice that it follows within the boundaries of the MPD agreement. The building structure to the right, which is sort of a C or a J shape, is the primary hotel structure. Residential structure shown to the left would be more residences. And then to the left also you see this people mover bridge, and the idea being that we would be able to connect the resort property to the cabriolet and connect it to Main Street, possibly creating an alternative drop-off location to the resort. You also notice that we've created this driveway, kind of steps up, goes up about 80 feet from the corner of Lowell and Empire, and it steps away and brings you up into the site. Also provides with some fire fighting access, but what it does is it brings you through Old Town, then takes you away and brings you up into the mountains. We try to tuck this project up into the gulch and really try to remove it. We have an opportunity for some heavy planting and screening to really reduce the impact on the corner of Lowell and the surrounding Old Town properties. So we think there's a lot of things happening in this project and this concept that could be really unique and really respond to Old Town in a positive way. This is a model, massing model we've built of it. You'll notice it doesn't have as much detail as the previous model. The massing actually consumes all the areas that would have balconies and other things, but you can start to understand a concept of what the massing might look like, how those roof forms might follow the terrain, how we'd be able to maintain a tremendous amount of existing vegetation on the property and then create something that's more unique. Create a really interesting courtyard within the project itself too. And you'll notice that the building crosses over the ski run. The idea is that you actually ski underneath the building. And we're kind of excited about how that transition happens and you open up into this other space as you're skiing down the mountain. Looking up Lowell, you'll notice all of the density has been removed from the end of the street. You'll notice to the right on the top the residential structure stepping up the mountainside, and then you see the bridge that connects the pedestrians to Main Street, connecting across there. That's that white line going across the page or across the screen. And then we're looking at the project as it steps away over Lower Main. And then another view from the corner of Main and Heber. Now realize we're also looking over the Kimball Arts Center, so we're probably about 30 feet up in the air with this view. But you'll notice you can see the residential structure peeking over the ridge just above the ski lift there. We think it's doing a good job of following terrain, but we've also looked at another option of how this might go into as a design concept. So concept number 3 takes into account that idea of moving the residential structure up into the gulch. And in doing so, we've stepped outside of the MPD boundary agreement. But since we're basically not using any of the MPD boundary agreement that's south of the ski lifts, we feel like there could be some modifications that might happen in this agreement. And again, we followed the terrain here versus cutting across the terrain artificially, which is what the boundary was doing. So if you look to the bottom right, the building follows the terrain and angles up. Interesting thing that does is it steps it away from the property, allows the residential structure to move up into the gulch. So we still have the hotel on the bottom right, curling up and over the ski run, and then the residential structure located across that. It's connected by one bridge. So we reduced the number of bridges coming across the ski run in this scheme. There's a couple of other interesting things happening. You can see those better in the model. We're maintaining the same people mover bridge. But as a courtyard goes, this courtyard would actually function better in the summertime, allowing more light in because it opens it up more to the southwest. In the wintertime, the restrictions aren't quite as great because the mountain puts the project in shadow sooner, and so the building doesn't put shadow on it. But in the summertime, this is a better solution for the courtyard spaces. This is another model, a massing model showing concept number 3. It's an aerial view. You can see how it's pushed up into the gulch quite a bit more. And then a view up Lowell, and you'll notice you can't see any of the historic, or any of the project that's being proposed from Lowell's viewshed. You see the pedestrian bridge coming across, but we think that'd be an actually very interesting icon at the end of that and a very low impact visually. And then a look back over from Lower Main, and then from Main and Heber, and you'll notice that really you can't see the residential structure because it's now pushed back behind the ridge, behind the ski lift. So those are the concepts that we've developed. The next slides are going to talk a little bit about building efficiencies and why it's so important to review this based on perception versus numbers. And we've looked at how do you define what efficiencies are. So this is a diagram that shows what a hotel might look like, hotel room. You see the purple is the hotel rooms and the green is the circulation in the walls. And in an average project, you might have an area of 3,750 square feet on each side. That's 7,500 square feet in that residential. And then your circulation walls might be 2,500 square feet. Total of that floor might be 10,000 square feet. Your gross efficiency factor, 2,500 square feet out of 10,000 square feet is 25%. But your efficiency factor related to the net residential is actually 33.33%. So numbers can be very interesting and you can kind of tweak them in any way you'd like. But what we've proposed is something a little different. This project shows a double-loaded corridor, but the project that we're proposing actually would have a number of portions that are single-loaded. And I bring this up because it's going to have a different efficiency factor. So if you take the hotel rooms off the other end of the building, you still have the other circulation walls that go in. And so your gross efficiency factor moves to 40% per floor, and your efficiency factor in net residential actually becomes 66%. So it's kind of an interesting study in how these things work. And you can see the section at the bottom left of the screen here shows how we're proposing the project to fit into the landscape using the building as a retaining wall itself. There's a lot of benefit to this concept, a lot less excavation, probably some reduced construction costs, but we have some increased costs in square footage. So that's why I bring up the point that this building and the concepts we're showing may actually have a larger gross square footage. The net residential would be the same, but the impact may be significantly less. And so that kind of wraps up the concepts that we've talked about, and we're looking forward to getting some input back and moving forward with the next steps in the project. Thank you.